Some of the research that we're doing, actually, it's largely focused on herring, but it actually coincided with some unique projects with Scott.
Walk around.
Yeah. And, I'd like to give a little background of what we're doing and kind of where it evolved to researching striped bass. So, why are we researching striped bass? Well, it actually starts with a major prey species, river herring. So these herring fish hold a significant importance to the local ecosystem as a forage fish for many other fish and mammals and birds that rely heavily on herring as the first substantial food source available after the long winter. They're a major cornerstone that support all the upper trophic levels, and they're also of great importance to the indigenous peoples of Martha's Vineyard, the Wampanoags. So river herring is a general term used to refer to two species, blueback and alewife. The two species are very similar in appearance and behavior. There are variations and differences. Like bass, they are anadromous and able to live in both fresh and salt water. And adult herring live in open ocean but return inland waterways, estuaries, and streams to spawn each spring. So the Wampanoag tribe of Gayhead Aquinnah is located on the island of Martha's Vineyard, for those of you who might be familiar with it. In southeastern Massachusetts, the tribe has inhabited the coastal island of the Vineyard, or Nope, for over 13,000 years. Their island and coastal location have allowed them to forge a deep and profound connection with nature over several millennia, with many aquatic species, including river herring, which are integral to tribal culture. And unfortunately, many of these resources have shown significant and continuing decline and have led to decreasing access to traditional sustenance foods and a disconnection to tribal culture. So the area of study is Menemsha Pond Complex. It's located in the western end of Martha's Vineyard. Tribal Trust lands abuts two significant bodies of water, Menemsha Pond and Squibnocket Pond. Menemsha Pond is a saltwater pond that's fed directly by moving tides of Vineyard Sound. The pond's approximately 700 acres and is part of a watershed containing 1,700 acres overall. Attached to Menemsha are two smaller additional salt ponds, Nashaquitz and Stonewall, which are also fed by Menemsha. Menemsha Pond also connects to a 600-acre brackish pond known as Squibnocket. Squibnocket is fed by another number of small streams and brooks, groundwater recharge within its own 1,200-acre watershed. It's a brackish system with a shoreline dominated by marsh, shrub, bush, maritime woodlands, and wetland dominates the eastern coves with dunal barriers, beaches to the southwest. There's limited tidal exchange, only occurring during the height of a high tide, with the exception of lunar tidal events. The surrounding pond system is sparsely populated with no formal agricultural operations, and there is a beach access to the east. And despite this popular location, the pond actually remains largely unvisited by people. So Squibnocket and Menemsha are connected by a narrow creek stretching about a third of a mile, and it's locally known as the Herring Creek. And it's critically and culturally and ecologically important because it serves as the sole aquatic passage between Menemsha and Squibnocket Pond, which our river herring use to reach their ancestral spawning grounds. So this semi-tidal system, which regularly flows out of Squibnocket via the creek to Menemsha about 21 hours each day and only reverses direction at the height of the high tide for the remainder. Each spring, adult river herring travel from the Atlantic to Menemsha, pass through the creek and end in Squibnocket to spawn. River herring have a natal homing instinct where they are driven to reproduce in the same place where they were spawned. So these herring are unique to Aquinnah. So river herring were once a common part of island life, and there was once a time that herring were so prevalent that their harvest was measured by the barrel, and no one would ever have dreamed that one day we would have a scarcity of these fish. In the early 20th century, there were at least 20 herring runs across Massachusetts that yielded catches of 1 million fish or more annually. Squibnocket was once one of these runs with an estimated population to hold about 1.5 million herring. And the Vineyard runs were once so abundant with river herring that just 100 years ago, the island had a greater reported harvest of river herring than the rest of the Commonwealth combined. So we used to have a lot of fish. Now there's less than a fraction of these fish that make it back to our waters. So the Wampanoag tribe has managed an active herring run in Aquinnah for roughly the last 150 years. But the fish has provided sustenance for the Wampanoag people for far longer than they can recall. There we go. So The protection, restoration, and enhancement of sustenance and cultural resources is the highest priority to the Wampanoag tribe. In order to get a handle on the situation, the tribe initiated a monitoring program to get in front of the problem with concrete data to create effective management plans and restore these fish to more sustainable numbers. Research into population dynamics, ecosystem health, habitat availability, and water quality will provide insights into the ability to restore a culturally significant tribal fishery. Beginning in 2016, this ongoing study has been backed by a host of incredible partnerships, all directed around river herring monitoring and the development of strategies to evaluate key issues. This program is poised to be one of the most significant compilations of biologic and environmental surveys regarding Squibnocket Pond. So in order to gauge the state of the tribal fishery, we needed to get some concrete hold on some significant baseline data. Let's see if I can get those videos to run. There we go. With the assistance of the Division of Marine Fisheries, a seasonal video station in Weir was installed in the creek, and the station served as a way to funnel the fish through the creek through a tunnel that contained a video camera. The video feeds through a specialized fish counting software that aids us in keeping track of every fish and other animals entering and exiting Squibnocket Pond throughout the entirety of the migration. All right, so we've discovered the Aquinnah herring run apparently has a baseline population of around 30,000 herring as part of their annual migration. However, this number has taken a further decline in the past 3 years, actually. So the count of fish is maybe around 1 to 1.5% of historic numbers, basically bottomed out at this point. So the tribal herring program has the added benefit of extensive water quality analysis conducted in-house through the Wampanoag Environmental Laboratory. Established back in 2001, the laboratory provides the scientific backbone for the tribe's environmental programs, and for over 2 decades has collected valuable water quality data from the surrounding tribal lands. While Menemsha Pond is a healthy system, Squibnocket's water quality would be considered heavily impacted. Lack of flushing, excessive nutrients, cyanobacteria blooms, and decreased dissolved oxygen are just a few of the issues that afflict the pond. Despite the historic and cultural importance of Squibnocket Pond, it has in many ways been long overlooked and taken for granted by the scientific community, potentially due to its complexity and lack of accessibility. In any case, we've been persistent in ensuring that missing gaps of data are being filled. And of note, we've recently completed the most comprehensive bathymetric and sediment composition surveys ever conducted within the system. These systems have been crucial in helping identify and classify available habitat in areas that need protection and restoration. So another important question we're seeking to answer is to understand our herring migration patterns and how they utilize the run. So along the run, we've installed a number of antenna arrays capable of reading passive integrated transponders, PIT tags. Same technology as when you're going down the freeway and you've got your fast pass. Over the last 3 years, our team has caught and surgically implanted PIT tags on over 1,000 fish. Biologic data is collected for each fish associated with a personalized tag number. The fish are then released and tracked whenever they pass by an antenna. The object here is to identify how and when our fish migrate and answer the questions regarding unique habits and patterns. Do our fish traverse the run in one single go? How long do they stay within Squibnocket once they've reached their spawning ground? And it allows us to track repeat spawners from 1 year to the next and help us get an idea on how many return to Squibnocket annually and to gauge from what age class. We've identified a number of repeat spawners that have displayed some very unique behaviors. Example being that returning fish appear to have a tendency to arrive significantly earlier than the year prior. So we've had fish that we've tagged in, say, early May that have arrived in April, late May tags that have shown up in early March. So for some reason, the upper age classes are attempting to arrive sooner. A comprehensive understanding of the different species that our pond system contains and supports is a necessary component to the understanding of the health and quality of this ecosystem. So the implementation of eDNA analysis, seine netting, plankton tows, and video counts are all being used to answer the question of the surrounding species inventory, geospatial distribution, and residency times. Samples for eDNA have been collected at numerous sites across the pond complex starting in 2021. eDNA analysis can be used to determine overall presence of biodiversity in a given location using PCR or qPCR sequencing. The initial data appears to show a far larger diversity of species than all of our other diversity sampling efforts combined. Over 130 different vertebrate DNA signatures have already been identified, many of which have a multitude of haplotype variations. Other efforts include seine netting, planktonic distribution, which aid in abundance of species like juvenile herring, as well as identifying presence type and availability of planktonic food sources. So a significant aspect that could be affecting our local herring population is the effect of predation. It's well known within the Up Island community, although a very well-kept secret to outsiders, that the tribal herring creek has always been a hotspot for striper activity. Over the years of monitoring herring, we've counted the presence of striped bass along with other animals passing through the run. We've noted significant numbers of these predators that are utilizing the run in the early season prior to the noted migration and appear to be emanating from within Squibnocket Pond. Year after year, we've documented keeper slot bass in the early season leaving the system always prior to when any migratory schoolies have become caught within the Martha's Vineyard watersheds or Cape Cod in general. Between the first and second week in April, bass begin to stir. Sometimes within the span of maybe an hour, maybe 125 keeper slot fish will potentially leave the system in that early spring time. So this could indicate a potential resident population of striped bass within the pond system, which are choosing to forego their natural instinct to migrate, staying year-round within our waters. So in the late fall, we started dropping in GoPros to gauge what kind of striped bass presence we thought we might have so far into the season. And it turns out there was actually a lot more occupying the creek late season than we initially believed. So what might what might this mean for our herring? Well, a year-round striped bass population could skew the predator-prey dynamics within the system. As herrings slowly begin their migration back to their natal spawning grounds, the arrival may be met with an overwhelming amount of predators that further diminish the already dwindling fishery. So in a healthy system, there should be each higher trophic level should be fewer than their prey to ensure food availability. Should this in fact be the case, there's an imbalance in the food chain, but the bass are not the issue. Herring should be plentiful and would normally be able to overwhelm their predators easily to spawn an entire next generation with numbers that pass through this gauntlet. The system may not be functioning properly due to man-made causes. Overfishing diminishes available stocks. And polluting inland waters decreases suitable spawning habitat and increases potential mortality for juvenile river herring. By identifying less understood dynamics of a resident bass population on a diminished fishery herring population, we may be able to provide alternative views on how best to manage and restore the fishery. However, we weren't really sure how we could prove that bass that we were seeing were in fact a resident population. And so through a very unique chain of events involving a pretty incredible tribal high school student, we connected with Dr. Scott Bennett of MBL, who was actively conducting striped bass research that involved acoustic monitoring to track fish. And so when we first started communicating with Scott, we mentioned the possibility that we're pretty sure we have a year-round population of striped bass that aren't migrating. And Scott essentially was just like, no, that's not the case. So we started sharing some of these videos, and he's like, all right, I think I'm in. Like, you guys have a compelling argument. So we ended up launching a research partnership between the Wampanoag tribe and MBL to document this unique behavior. So this initial striped bass monitoring program would involve setting up an array of acoustic receivers similar to Scott's research in Woods Hole that would tell us if acoustically tagged fish stayed present within our pond system and if they left, and held potential to track migrating fish across the eastern seaboard should they come into proximity with any other receiver associated with the Atlantic Cooperative Telemetry Network. 4 acoustic receivers were deployed, 3 within Squibnocket and 1 at the mouth of the creek in Menemsha Pond. So to catch specimens, we designed a trap and holding system that allowed us to herd the fish through a one-way opening and into an enclosed pen. And from here, the fish could be easily netted. This design was unfortunately not initially thought of as our first design to keep fish enclosed was a complete failure, and they all escaped. We did eventually get it right. So this past fall, 20 striped bass were surgically implanted with an acoustic transmitter over 2 successful tagging events. Species were anesthetized using clove oil, implanted with a transmitter, and stitched up and allowed to recover before release. Just let him swim off. There we go. So we can now confirm, now that it's springtime, that 19 of these 20 fish opted to stay the winter to await the arrival of herring. This system is a bit unique. Unlike stripers that might get entrapped within a great pond due to something like a breach closure, Squibnocket Run is always open. These fish are not landlocked, have ample opportunity to leave, and since this is a semi-tidal system, the elevated salinity of entering seawater at the height of high tides would provide a sensory cue as to where the exit back to open water is. They appear to be actively choosing to forego their migratory instinct. And our initial acoustic data also shows that these bass are primarily staying in the vicinity of the head of the creek, very close to the exit of the pond. So, holdover bass are well known to fishermen throughout the Northeast, although the extent is poorly documented. Poorly documented likely since as fishermen, we don't really provide the details and locations of our best fishing spots. So, however, there is a potential that this type of occurrence may be taking place in other areas across New England. Even so, our colleagues from MBL believe that this might be one of the first scientifically documented cases of a resident bass population under such conditions. Still sticking around. Ample bait around there, too. So where do we go from here? Well, more data is always better, so we intend to expand our monitoring efforts. We're going to deploy more receivers, additional receivers, especially within the creek for increased resolution of their movements within the system and identify any unique behaviors like the frequency and duration that the bass utilize the creek to forage. Tag more bass and track them as part of a multi-year acoustic monitoring program. For how many years might a resident stay or leave over time? It may be just as important to track fish that utilize the run and end up migrating. And not every bass that passes through the creek will stay, so there's the potential to identify transient communities that habitually return, much like those in Scott's active study in Eel Pond. Could stripers be using the pond system as a spawning habitat? And it's certainly possible, since nature does find a way, although viability and survivability of young might be limited. We intend to initiate focused monitoring activities like seining and plankton tows to identify the presence of eggs and juvenile striped bass to investigate. And additionally, with the Army Corps of Engineers, we're working on creating an agent-based ecological model as a potential tool to track challenges in herring management. Specifically, this tool is a habitat suitability models that can be used to identify potential herring habitat and agent-based models that can stimulate interactions between herring and striped bass within their spatial environment. One of the hopeful outcomes is that this could provide the framework for other communities to also document this unique behavior. No one really knows how established a year-round bass population may have become in the Northeast, and with how nature is adapting to stressors we enact on them, this could become a more regular occurrence from Martha's Vineyard and beyond. We look forward to sharing more of our unique findings as we continue to learn more about this unfamiliar behavior and how it relates to the management of a tribal herring fishery. So thank you very much.